A dead world hung beneath them, its surface a latticework of alien spires and cold industrial scars. The planet, designated Velith Prime, wasn't just another occupied rock. It was the beating heart of the enemy's war machine. Inside the stolen dropship, the four operatives sat in the flickering red light of the cargo bay, silent but for the hum of thrusters and the distant rumble of their approach. Captain Elias Rourke, leader, scarred hands gripping the harness across his chest, eyes locked on the mission timer counting down. Lena Cade, problem solver, engineering specialist, tapping commands into a hacked control pad, feeding false data into the enemy's orbital defenses. Silas Vance, dreamer, historian turned resistance fighter, knuckles white on his rifle, watching, listening, thinking. Dax, wildcard Carter, pilot, demolitions expert, professional pain in the ass, grinning like a man with nothing to lose as he tightened the straps on his harness. "This is a bad idea," Silas muttered, voice low. Dax shot him a wink. "Bad ideas are just good ideas that haven't worked yet." Rourke exhaled sharply. "Stay focused. We're coming in cold. The second we hit Atmo, we lose stealth." "Cade?" Lena's fingers moved with surgical precision. "Spoofing their sensors, buying us a 10-second window before they realize we're not one of theirs." Rourke checked his weapon, then glanced at Silas, who looked seconds away from asking the one question that always came before hell broke loose. "Why are we doing this?" Silas never got the chance. The ship lurched, a violent shudder rattling through the hull as warning klaxons blared. The illusion was broken. They'd been spotted. "Hang on!" Dax whooped, gripping the controls as the ship went from controlled approach to a screaming meteor. Outside, Velith Prime's skyline burned past, a tangled jungle of alien towers and pulsing energy grids. Anti-aircraft cannons roared to life, filling the sky with electric death. Lena's fingers danced over her pad. "Diverting power, rerouting heat, sinks." A blast caught their wing. The ship spun, alarm shrieking. "Yeah, we're not making it to the landing pad," Dax called out cheerfully. "So, Plan B?" Plan B was never good. Rourke grabbed the emergency lever. "Strap in. Hard drop." The cargo bay doors blew open. Wind howled. The ground rushed up to meet them. Then they jumped. Rourke hit first, knees bending to absorb the force of the dropjet's last-second burn. The others followed, hitting the ground in rapid succession. The dropship slammed into a distant tower, exploding in a wave of fire and debris. No turning back now. Rourke scanned their surroundings. A steel gantry leading into the heart of a fortress-like complex. Lights flared as alien patrols scrambled toward the crash site. "Move!" he ordered. They ran. Lena sprinted ahead, hacking the first security gate on the fly. Silas covered their flank, rifle steady. Dax tossed a grenade over his shoulder, just because. The explosion sent shrapnel and bodies skyward. "They know we're here now," Silas growled. Dax smirked. "Figured I'd send a greeting card." Rourke pulled them into cover as alien voices barked orders from all directions. They had seconds before the enemy locked down the entire sector. "Lena, where's our inn?" She didn't look up, fingers flying over her pad. "There's a maintenance shaft, 2 levels down." "Then we move." The team plunged into the shadows of Velith Prime's war factory, the scent of ozone and burning metal thick in the air. Their mission had just begun. The corridor pulsed with an eerie, sickly green glow. Velith Prime's war factory was a labyrinth of interwoven steel and shifting machinery, its walls lined with conduits that hummed like a living thing. Overhead, automated sentries twitched, scanning for movement. The team moved like ghosts, silent, deadly, precise. Lena crouched at the next junction, her fingers flying across her wrist pad. Bypassing security grid, hold. A bead of sweat traced down her temple as red alien glyphs scrolled too fast to follow. Silas watched her work, rifle at the ready. "You sure you can crack this?" Lena snorted. "Please, I cracked their encryption before breakfast." The terminal let out a subtle chime. The sentry turrets powered down. Rourke gave a nod. "We're in." The team pressed forward, boots whispering against grated steel. The deeper they moved, the heavier the air became, a mix of industrial smog and something acrid, almost organic. Dax whispered as he peered over a railing, "I don't like this place. Smells like bad decisions and war crimes." Below them, a vast assembly line churned, alien machinery crafting rows of massive exoskeletal warframes. But that wasn't what made Rourke's gut clench. It was what was inside the warframes. Suspended in pulsing biogel, human bodies were fused into the alien constructs, limbs stripped to nerve endings, eyes wide and vacant, hooked into the war machines like living conduits. Silas swallowed hard. God, they're still alive. Lena's voice was tight. Not just alive, integrated. Rourke clenched his fists. The enemy had mocked humanity for being weak, primitive, and yet they needed their minds, their reflexes, their instincts to pilot these monstrosities. Dax exhaled sharply. "Yeah, number, we're blowing this place to hell." Lena was already pulling up schematics. "The reactor core is 3 levels down. A controlled overload would take out the entire facility." Rourke nodded. "Good. But we need to get intel first. If this isn't just a one-off." The words died in his throat. Because the war machines? They were waking up. The first abomination twitched inside its frame, then screamed, a raw, distorted human wail, as the machine seized control of its nerves. Others followed. Eyes rolled back, bodies convulsed against the biomechanical restraints. Then they turned toward the intruders. A klaxon blared. Lights turned blood red. "Run!" Rourke barked. Dax didn't need to be told twice. He tossed a satchel charge onto the nearest assembly line. The explosion rocked the platform, sending shattered glass and metal flying. Lena was already pulling new routes. Voice clipped. "Maintenance tunnels, 40 meters ahead." Silas laid down suppressing fire as they sprinted, rounds sparking off charging warframes. These things were fast, unnaturally fast. A clawed metal hand swiped at Rourke. He dodged just in time, feeling the air ripple with the force of the near miss. He spun, emptied a full magazine into its chest cavity, but the thing barely staggered. "They're armored!" Dax slid to a stop, grinning. "Cool. Bet their insides aren't." He lobbed a thermite grenade. The war machine roared as molten fire tore through its exposed tissue, its scream turning into a gurgling death rattle. "Confirmed! Insides are squishy!" Dax whooped. They reached the tunnel entrance. Lena slammed a bypass code into the panel, and the hatch slid open, just as something massive landed behind them. It was twice the size of the others, a warframe of polished obsidian, its host completely obscured beneath the plating. It didn't scream like the others. It watched, studied them. Then it spoke. "You should not have come here." The voice was human. For a fraction of a second, no one moved. Then it lunged. Rourke shoved Silas through the hatch as the creature's massive arm cleaved through the air. Metal screamed as the wall behind them buckled inward from the impact. Dax emptied his shotgun into its face. It barely flinched. "Lena, move!" Rourke bellowed. She slammed a final command into the panel. The tunnel door sealed shut just as the creature lunged again, its fist denting the door inward before the locking mechanisms fully engaged. Silence. The team panted in the darkness of the tunnel, hearts pounding. Then behind the sealed door, the voice whispered, "We remember you." The lights flickered. The maintenance tunnels stretched before them, narrow, claustrophobic, and humming with unseen power. Every footstep echoed in the metal throat of the complex. The walls sweated condensation, thick with the scent of burning coolant, and something rancid. No one spoke for a long moment. Then Dax exhaled. "Okay, not to be dramatic, but what the actual hell was that?" Rourke ignored him, eyes flicking to Lena. "Can you lock them out?" Lena's fingers danced over her pad. "Tryin'." The screen flickered. She frowned, tapping harder. Flicker, glitch, static. Her expression darkened. "They're overriding the system," Silas tensed. What do you mean they? Before she could answer, the tunnel lurched. A deep groaning noise shuddered through the walls, like the facility itself was alive. The lights flickered again, then changed, shifting from industrial white to a pulsing organic blue. A cold realization crawled up Rourke's spine. They weren't fighting an alien empire. They were fighting something worse. Lena's voice was tight. I think the facility is networked. A single intelligence. Silas's throat was dry. The pilots in those machines, they're not just hosts, are they? No, Lena swallowed. They're linked, connected by something beyond just tech. Rourke exhaled sharply. They're a hive. Silence. Dax clapped his hands together. Awesome. Love that. Hey, not to be that guy, but does that mean they can, I don't know, hear us? As if in answer, a voice whispered through the tunnel. Yes. The walls convulsed. The ambush metal tore open. The ceiling split like muscle as war forms dropped in, their bodies snapping unnaturally as they landed. The lead one tilted its head, joints clicking before it lunged. Rourke fired. A headshot staggered it, but didn't drop it. Dax spun, unloading a blast of thermite rounds into another. The thing shrieked, burning from the inside out. Lena ducked, slicing her wrist pad through the air. The lights exploded, throwing everything into chaotic, strobing darkness. Silas tackled an oncoming warform, plunging his knife into the exposed tissue at its joints. It spasmed violently before going limp. He rolled off it, breath ragged. More were coming. Too many. Lena's voice was urgent. The reactor's close, just past these tunnels. Rourke reloaded. Then we move. Now. They ran. The reactor chamber was a cavernous abyss of pulsating machinery. Pipes pulsed with blue liquid, running like veins into a massive central core, its energy twisting in unnatural ways. This wasn't just power. This was something else. And then they saw it. Suspended above the core was a human, or what was left of one. A man wired into the reactor, flesh fused with biomechanical tendrils. His eyes glowing with the same eerie blue light. He looked down at them and smiled. Silas took a step forward, voice hoarse. God, is that... The man spoke. His voice was a chorus. You remember me, Captain Rourke. Rourke's blood ran cold. He did. The betrayal. His name was Commander Alan Richter. Once a hero. Once human. Now something else. You left us, Richter said, his voice layered with static, ancient and omnipresent. We were taken. We adapted. And now, so will you. The war forms emerged from the shadows. Dozens of them. No guns raised. No rush to attack. Just watching. Waiting. Lena's whisper was barely audible. They don't want to kill us. Silas's throat was tight. They want to convert us. Dax, ever the diplomat, clicked his tongue. Yeah, number. That's a hard pass from me, Chief. Richter smiled. You don't have a choice? And the hive mind surged forward. Rourke moved first. A single shot. Straight into Richter's skull. It hit, and Richter laughed. The wound closed instantly, blue energy sealing the damage like liquid metal. You still don't understand, he whispered. We are beyond you now. The warforms charged. Lena hacked the reactor's failsafes, her fingers blurring across the console. I can overload it. Dax threw a pack of explosives into the reactor's coolant tubes. Or we could just blow it the hell up. Silas covered them, firing into the mass of advancing warforms. But they weren't stopping. Richter's voice echoed through the hive. Join us, Lena shouted. Now or never. Rourke grabbed the detonator. A single second stretched into eternity. Richter locked eyes with him, smiling. Rourke pressed the trigger. The explosion. The world erupted in light, heat, force, silence. Then Rourke was weightless for half a second before he slammed into something hard. His ears rang. His vision blurred. Silas's voice cut through the haze. We have to go. Rourke forced himself up. The reactor was collapsing. The entire facility was coming down with it. Dax was dragging Lena, who was coughing blood but grinning through it. Totally worth it. They ran. Behind them, Richter's voice screamed through the walls. Distorted, furious, inhuman, the hive was dying, and they had one chance to escape. The world was tearing itself apart. Pipes burst. Fire raged. The metal veins of the war factory spasmed like a dying beast. The reactor's implosion wave surged outward, consuming everything with an eerie, twisting energy, more than just fire. Something unnatural collapsing in on itself. Rourke's boots slammed against the metal as they sprinted through the disintegrating corridors. Behind them, Richter's screams echoed through the collapsing hive mind, warped and fractured. Lena gasped, barely keeping pace. Her body rattled from the blast. Silas had one arm under her shoulder, keeping her moving. Dax skidded to a halt at a junction, eyes darting. Left? Lena coughed, flicking her wrist pad. No, right. Toward the transit hub. Dax didn't hesitate. Cool. Running now. They barreled through the final set of blast doors just as the corridor behind them folded inward. Matter collapsing like a black hole had swallowed it. They had seconds. The transit hub was an enormous launch bay. Rows of alien dropships lined against the far wall. Emergency sirens blaring. Automated defense turrets twitched to life. Lena was already on it, hacking into the control systems, fingers moving like a blur. One ship. There! She pointed at a sleek, angular dropship powering up. I can override it, but I need time. Silas and Rourke turned, rifles up. Dax planted a demo charge on a fuel line just in case. Then the warforms came. The last remnants of the hive surged into the bay, bodies stumbling, twitching, reforming, half-fused into the metal itself. At the center, Richter's broken form dragged itself forward. His eyes, human but wrong, locked onto Rourke. You cannot escape. Rourke's jaw clenched. Watch me! The enemy charged. Silas and Rourke unleashed hell. Rounds tore into warforms, severing limbs, punching through weakened plating. Dax lobbed incendiaries, setting the chamber ablaze, and still they came. One leapt for Lena. She ducked, stabbed a plasma cutter into its exposed neck. Sparks erupted as it collapsed, convulsing. Dax slammed a fresh mag into his shotgun. Hate to be that guy, but, this ain't sustainable, Lena's pad chirped. Ship's online. Move! They ran. The dropship was rising, autopiloting toward the hangar's exit shaft, but the platform beneath it was crumbling, falling into the imploding reactor core. Silas didn't stop running. He leapt first, grabbing the open ramp, pulling himself in. Lena was next. Rourke shoved her forward, boosting her up as Silas dragged her inside. Then Dax. He barely made the jump, fingers clinging to the edge as Silas grabbed his arm. Rourke turned. Richter was still standing. What was left of him? His body was warped, twisted flesh and metal, barely holding together. You think you've won? Richter's voice echoed. We are not dead. We are never dead. The ship was rising. Too fast. The jump was too far. Dax realized it first. His grin faltered. Oh, hell no. Nope. Rourke took 2 steps back and threw him. Dax slammed into the ramp, arms scrambling. Silas caught him, pulling him up, just as the ship lurched. Rourke! Lena screamed, but he was already falling. The blast door above them cracked open, revealing the black void of space. The implosion was sucking everything inward, a singularity of collapsing tech and biology, and Rourke was plummeting straight into it. Time slowed. The hive screamed. Something clicked in Rourke's mind. The stolen tech. The reverse-engineered alien grav thrusters built into the drop gear. Unstable. Unpredictable. But maybe, just maybe, humanity's greatest strength wasn't power. It was improvisation. He reached to his belt, slammed the emergency override on his thruster pack. The system wasn't designed for controlled flight, so he wouldn't control it. The thrusters roared to life, but instead of stabilizing, they burned too hot, too fast. He rocketed upward in a spiral of white-hot force, barely angling toward the ship. Silas lunged. Dax grabbed Silas' belt. And together they caught Rourke just as the dropship burst free of the collapsing facility. The last thing Rourke saw before the blast consumed Valith Prime was Richter, still standing, still smiling. Then the world vanished in fire. Rourke gasped awake as the ship's cabin stabilized. Oxygen flooded his lungs. His team, bruised, bloodied, but alive, were staring at him. Dax broke the silence. "I hate you so much right now." Lena laughed, ragged. Silas leaned back, exhausted. Outside the viewport, Velith Prime was gone. The enemy had mocked humanity, called them primitive apes, but humanity had stolen their tech, turned it against them. And now the galaxy knew the truth. Rourke exhaled, staring at the wreckage. "Round 1 goes to us."